Hello everyone, happy Wednesday. I hope you're all well. I thought I'd give another video a whirl today, so forgive me if it's too chatty or long, but some of you said it was useful, so I thought I'd talk you through another one of your lessons. So well done for the work you did last time and for the work you did yesterday on a bit of punctuation. And today, to help us with your speech writing and persuasive writing, the learning objective is to analyse how an article writer uses rhetorical techniques to communicate with the audience. So far, you've looked quite a lot at the conventions of different types of writing, different forms of writing, and how to start and how to finish. And you've done a short letter and a little bit of an article. So we're going to look at how one of the pros does it today and do a bit of analysis and practice our C's paragraphs. But I'm going to talk you through exactly what to do. So I'm going to play around a bit with the technology. So forgive me if it's not very smooth, but I shall try and make myself appear and disappear on certain slides. So, right. First thing, knowledge recall. So you may want to just pause the video and just have a quick look at the things that you have learned so far. Try to fill in those gaps and answer the questions. You can either write it down in your books or just do it in your head, and then we'll check on the next slide. So here we go. Did you get that right? I'm not going to go through all the answers, but if you have a look at those, pause the video again, check whether you got them right. If you weren't quite sure, then just embed those bits and pieces of information into your mind, and then we'll carry on. So back to the learning objective. As I said, we're going to look at an article and look at how an article writer, a real life article writer, uses rhetorical techniques. And we're going to have a look at an article from the New York Times about Captain Tom Moore. Now, I'm sure you've all heard a lot about him. He's been all over the news with the money that he's raised for the NHS. I'd be surprised if anyone has missed it, but if you have, don't worry, you're going to hear all about him in this article. So this article is actually attached to, as it looks there, is attached to your lesson. It's also in the Year 9 spoken language booklet, but I've attached it separately with a few bits of vocabulary in just to help you read it. So I'm going to read this through. Some of you might want to just skip this bit. You don't want to hear me read it, but sometimes it's easier to read these longer texts through with somebody else. So as I read it, you probably need to pause your video, actually, go and find the document and get it on screen and either read it yourself or I'll read it with you. Okay, so title: The 100-year-old who raised $40 million for the UK health workers. In the space of 6 weeks, 100-year-old Tom Moore, better known as Captain Tom, raised £40 million, actually, for the British Healthcare Service and became a national hero. By Mark Lander. Hannah Ingram Moore always knew her dad was a good story. A decorated British Army officer from World War II, Tom Moore is charming, droll, and confoundingly energetic. Spry doesn't begin to cover it. At 99, he was mowing the lawn, tending a greenhouse, and driving his own car. When he fell and broke his hip 18 months ago, he bought a treadmill to speed up the rehabilitation. I'm just going to pause there for a minute because I just want you to point out to you that there are some vocab boxes there on the right, slightly blue, with words in that you might find difficult, so you can have a look at those. And also, as we go along, I'm slightly in the way here with my camera. Let's see if I can move it, see how clever this thing is. Oh, see, I could put it up there. Also, as you read and listen out for rhetorical persuasive techniques. So actually there was some tripling there. We'll come back to that later. You don't really need to mark it on as you go through, but you're looking at how writers, real life writers, use some of the techniques that we have been looking at over the last few lessons. Okay, let's read on. Still, nothing could have prepared them for the media whirlwind that has swept Mr. Moore in less than 6 weeks into a rare altitude of superstardom. Prolific fundraiser, chart-topping performer, book writer, and all-round national hero. An enduring symbol of British pluck during a coronavirus pandemic that has confronted the country with its greatest test since the Second World War. When Captain Tom, as he was quickly nicknamed in the British press, turned 100 on April the 30th, Queen Elizabeth II sent him a personal greeting. And it was all because Mr. Moore did 100 laps of an 82-foot walk on the brick patio next to his garden in Marston Moretane, a tranquil village an hour outside north of London. Excuse me. The first step was the hardest, he said this week, and after that I got into the swing of it and kept on going. Mr. Moore's feet grew out of a challenge from his son-in-law, Colin Ingram. He would pay him £1 per lap if he completed 100 laps before his birthday. Mrs. Ingram Moore upped the ante. She suggested posting the campaign on an online charity service, Just Giving, to try and raise £1,000, about $1,200 for the NHS, which was then girding itself for an influx of coronavirus patients. Sure enough, Captain Tom's daily walk caught fire. It was the perfect human interest story in a country spooked by the mounting death toll and going stir-crazy in lockdown. By the time the BBC, CNN, NBC and Al Jazeera had finished broadcasting pictures of Mr. Moore ambling up and down next to his garden, hands gripping his walker, military medals gleaming on his natty blue blazer, his campaign had raised £32.8 million, or $40 million for the NHS. Cordial and wry, Mr. Moore seems tickled by his success, but not overwhelmed by it. Never in 100 years when we started did we anticipate this sum of money would be raised, he said. He drew a direct line from the beleaguered health workers of today fighting an invisible enemy to the brave soldiers in World War II. At that time, the people of my age, we were fighting on the front line and the general public was standing behind us, Mr. Moore said. In this instance, the doctors and nurses and all the medical people, they're the front line. It's up to my generation to back them up, just as we were backed up. Born in Keighley, a village in Yorkshire, Mr. Moore was trained as a civil engineer. In 1940, at 20, he was conscripted and assigned to the Duke of Wellington's regiment. First stationed in Cornwall, in southwest England, he was chosen for officers' training and deployed to India. Later, Mr. Moore was sent to Burma, now known as Myanmar. Back home in 1945, where he trained troops to drive tanks, Mr. Moore recalled his ambivalent feelings on the day the war in Europe ended. Amid the rejoicing, he thought of his comrades still fighting the Japanese in Southeast Asia. Mr. Moore's wartime service has been much celebrated in recent weeks, which coincided with the 75th anniversary of VE Day. He was named an honorary colonel of the Army Foundation College. The Royal Air Force dispatched fighter planes in a birthday flyover of his family's Bedfordshire home, a gracious compound, parts of which date to the late 16th century and sits on 6 manicured acres. Mr. Moore and his family, meanwhile, are coping with the bewildering fallout of sudden worldwide fame. They've stockpiled the 220,000 cards he got for his birthday at a local school, where a team of 140 volunteers opened them in shifts. They've received 5,000 gifts, keeping only a handful, like Christmas ornaments made by children, which they hang from a tree in the garden. On the radio, Mr. Moore had the #1 song in the charts, a duet of the Rodgers and Hammerstein standard, You'll Never Walk Alone, which he recorded with the English singer Michael Ball. The singer knocked out One by the Weekend, a Canadian R&B artist who urged fans to support the captain. Mr. Moore thanked him on Twitter, saying his grandson tells me you're rather talented and very popular. Mr. Moore chalks up his success to his cheerful disposition, and there's truth to that. But he has also tapped into 2 of the most revered traditions in British life: World War II, when Britain vanquished the scourge of tyranny, and the NHS, a symbol of the nation's post-war commitment to a fairer, more humane society. There's a reason Captain Tom has struck a chord, said James Holland, a writer of World War II histories. He is a representation of what we British imagine we are like, stoic, phlegmatic, and we just see it through with Churchillian spirit. He is an example of how we, as a nation, should be handling this experience. Okay, so well done if you put up with me reading that, but sometimes it's a bit easier to listen to. So that's a real writer in the New York Times. New York Times, they've picked up this information about Captain Tom, and they want to get across his personality and present him as the kind of hero that he's become here. So I wonder if whilst you were reading it, you noticed some of the other persuasive techniques that were used in there. We'll have a quick look. So we had some emotive language down here where the writer was talking about superstardom and talking about Captain Tom being a prolific fundraiser, chart-topping performer, book writer, all-round national hero. Some listing there as well. Oops. What else have we got? Further down the first page, you've got the use of metaphor, saying that Captain Tom's daily walk caught fire. And then you've got some facts and statistics about how much he raised. I'm just picking out a few here. I'm not picking out all of them, but just want you to see that real writers use these techniques to strengthen their arguments and their messages. More facts and statistics here. It looks like I should probably move myself down here. I'm going to get rid of my picture in a minute, actually. About the cards and the gift they received. And then I wonder if anybody noticed at the end has finished with an expert opinion, okay, a historian explaining why he thinks Captain Tom has been popular. So here's an article which is full of techniques and also lots of interesting information. And what we are going to do, or you are going to do, is to think about the answer to this question. How does the writer of the article present Captain Tom Moore? So I'm going to look at individual techniques. We're going to be revising C's paragraphs in order to analyse the text. And I think in a minute I'm going to get rid of myself. Let me just move me up there. Got something else to move. And basically what's going to happen is we're going to look at a model of a C's paragraph in answer to this question. I'm going to give you some partial paragraphs that you're going to complete, and then you'll end up by writing your own C's paragraph. And lots of you are really good at this already, so it shouldn't be a problem, but because we're not with you, we just want to walk you through these steps. Okay, so let's look at an example in answer to the question, how does the writer present Captain Tom Moore? Now, I'm going to see if I can get rid of myself now. But I don't quite know how I'm going to do that. Not as good as, let's just see what happens. Oh, I've gone, excellent. Okay, so this is a different way of laying out the C's paragraph, where we put the evidence in the middle, and then around it you plan for the statement, evidence, inference, zoom, and further exploration. So here's an example. How is Captain Moore presented? So Captain Moore is being presented as a hero as well as being an affable elderly gentleman. Affable means friendly and likeable. Here's some evidence which shows that he's presented as a hero. A decorated British Army officer from World War II, Tom Moore is charming, droll, and confoundingly energetic. What does that imply? Well, we make the inference because the writer, Landler, implies that Tom has seen very successful military service. That's what decorated means, that you have got lots of medals. He's seen very successful military service as well as being a likeable personality. Then zooming in on some of these words or the techniques, the tripling of adjectives summarises Landler's positive impression of Captain Moore with the adverb confoundingly, suggesting that Tom's fun and lively character is somewhat surprising for his age, for such an old person. Bit more explanation or further zooming in by using the adjective decorated. Landler highlights Captain Moore's achievements while in the army, which will be explored later in the article. So how is he presented? A hero, likeable, here's the evidence, here's the exploration of it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Let's have a look at another one that you're going to have to complete. So here we've got another statement. Captain Moore is immediately presented as an able-bodied man, which is uncharacteristic for his age. We've got another quotation here. Spry doesn't begin to cover it. At 99, he was mowing the lawn, tending a greenhouse, driving his own car. There is some inference. Okay, there's a bit of exploration, but the zoom is missing. So the first task for you is going to be to have a look through this, read the statement and the evidence again, read the inference. What is this telling you about him, and which are the words in here that you want to zoom in on that helps us to understand that he's able-bodied, he's lively, he's energetic. Okay, and as a clue, there's a technique in here. Okay, he's mowing the lawn, tending a greenhouse, driving his own car, 1, 2, 3, tripling. There we are, I've told you now. So have a think about that, and also the word spry. And if you look on the text itself, which is attached, it tells you that that word means energetic. So for this task here, you can just write number 1 in your book, have a look through it, and then just write the zoom part really clearly that you think will fit into that paragraph. Okay, so you're going to pause and do that now. Now, in the second paragraph, you're going to be completing the inference and the zoom, okay? So here the statement is about Landler, the writer, using statistics to show the support that Captain Moore has received. Some evidence in there about the number of cards and the number of volunteers. And what I want you to do now is to write number 2, write the inference that goes with that statement and evidence, and then the zoom, what you could zoom in on. The explore's already there, so you don't really need to do that. So have another look through that, and then write in your books number 2, pause the video, and write the inference and the zoom. Okay, third one, this time you've got to have a go at the statement. Okay, so what are you going to say about how he's presented? If the evidence is he drew a direct line from the beleaguered health workers of today fighting an invisible enemy to the brave soldiers in World War II. There is some inference there, okay? The inference is that Captain Moore understands the sacrifice of those on the front line, likens it to the healthcare workers. There is some zoom there for you to have a look at, zoomed in on the words. But I think I want you to make a good statement about how Captain Moore is presented to start this paragraph, and then want you to fill in the gaps where the dots are in the explore section about maybe thinking about why the writer is talking about Captain Moore linking his experiences in the war to people fighting, as it were, the coronavirus in the hospitals. Okay, so write number 3 in your books, have a look through that, have a go at writing just the statement and then the explore section. And finally, you're going to write a whole paragraph in full. You can do this. You've seen lots of tasks, lots of examples. This is the evidence that we've sort of been given here. And the evidence that, you're being given is, you might not want to copy all of it out, but it is the quotation from the historian. So the statement might start something like, Landler uses the expert view of James Holland to what? What is he trying to, how is he presenting Captain Tom in the very final paragraph of this article? So have a look at the evidence, think about how Captain Tom's being presented, put the bit of evidence in that you want, say what you think that evidence is suggesting overall about Captain Moore, the final point that he's making about Captain Moore. Think about which parts of this quotation you want to zoom in on. I think that some of you could be aiming for zooming in on at least 2 things, 2 words or techniques. And then in your explore at the end, you're going to show your little bit of understanding about the situation, I suppose, and why the writer is interested in making this connection between Captain Tom's military history and what's happening at the moment with the coronavirus and people fighting it in the NHS. So you've listened a lot to me. I hope the explanations are helpful. Don't be confused and think that this is anything different that you've done. The exercises in the previous slides really just give you 4 or 5 quotations to think about and start modelling and scaffolding some C's paragraphs for you. So well done. I know you're going to do well with it, and I'll see you soon.